The groundskeeper noticed it first on a Tuesday morning in late September. Marcus Chen had worked at Forest Lawn Memorial Park for 17 years, and he knew every inch of the great mausoleum like the back of his weathered hands. He had walked past Michael Jackson's resting place thousands of times, always with the same reverence, always with the same careful attention to detail. But that morning, something was different. The marble floor near the crypt had developed a hairline crack. It was subtle, almost invisible in the dim morning light filtering through the stained glass windows. Marcus knelt down, running his fingers along the fissure, feeling the slight depression beneath his touch. The crack followed a perfect rectangular pattern, too precise to be natural settling. His heart quickened as he traced the outline with his fingertips. In all his years maintaining this sacred space, he had never seen anything like this. He stood up slowly, his knees protesting, and pulled out his phone to call his supervisor. But something stopped him. A voice in his head, perhaps intuition, perhaps something else entirely, told him to wait, to investigate further before raising any alarms. The mausoleum was empty at this early hour, the silence broken only by his own breathing and the distant hum of the building's climate control system. Marcus retrieved a flashlight from his maintenance cart and returned to the crack. He pressed down on one corner of the rectangular outline, and to his absolute shock, he felt movement. The marble section shifted slightly, as if mounted on hidden hinges. His pulse raced as he applied more pressure, and with a soft grinding sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet space, a section of the floor began to tilt downward. Beneath the marble was darkness, complete and absolute darkness that seemed to swallow the beam of his flashlight. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine despite the climate-controlled temperature. He had discovered something that had been hidden for over a decade, something that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal. The opening revealed a narrow staircase descending into the earth, steps carved from the same material as the mausoleum itself. Every rational part of his mind screamed at him to stop, to call security, to back away and let the authorities handle whatever this was. But curiosity, that fundamental human drive that has led to both our greatest discoveries and our deepest troubles, pulled him forward. Marcus positioned his flashlight to shine down the stairs and took his first step into the unknown. The air that rose from below was different from the sterile, conditioned atmosphere of the mausoleum. It was cooler, damper, carrying with it a faint scent of old electronics and something else he couldn't quite identify. Paper, perhaps. Leather. The smell of a room that had been sealed away from the world for years. The staircase was steep, with 23 steps in total. Marcus counted each one as he descended, his free hand trailing along the smooth wall for balance. At the bottom, his flashlight beam swept across a small room, perhaps 15 feet square. The walls were lined with shelves, and those shelves were filled with items that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. Leather-bound journals, their spines embossed with dates ranging from the early 80s to just months before Michael Jackson's death. Videotapes labeled in neat handwriting. Photographs in protective sleeves. Hard drives sealed in antistatic bags. A laptop computer, vintage by today's standards, sitting on a small desk in the corner. But it was the center of the room that truly captured Marcus's attention. A glass case, illuminated by some internal power source that had somehow remained active all these years, stood like an altar. Inside was a single white glove, sequined and gleaming, positioned as if reaching toward the ceiling. Beneath it, a handwritten note on cream-colored paper, the ink still dark and legible after all this time. Marcus approached the case slowly, his footsteps echoing softly in the confined space. He leaned close to read the note, and what he saw made his hands tremble. The message was written in Michael Jackson's own hand, a fact Marcus knew from having seen performers' signature countless times on memorial flowers and tributes left by visitors above. The note read simply, "For whoever finds this room, the truth was always here. The world wasn't ready then. Perhaps it is now. Everything they need to know is in these pages and these recordings. I trust you to decide what comes next." Marcus stood frozen, understanding the magnitude of what he had discovered. This wasn't just a hidden room. It was a time capsule, a confession, a final testament from one of the most famous and controversial figures in modern history. Whatever was contained in these journals, these recordings, these carefully preserved artifacts, Michael Jackson had deemed it important enough to hide beneath his own final resting place. Important enough to keep secret even from his closest family and friends. The groundskeeper's mind raced with questions. Who had built this room? When had it been constructed? Had Michael Jackson supervised its creation, or had someone else built it on his behalf after his death? And most importantly, what secrets did it contain? What truths had been deemed too dangerous or too explosive to share with the world in 2009, but might be acceptable now, over a decade later? Marcus knew his life had just changed forever. He could seal this room back up, pretend he had never found it, and return to his simple, predictable existence. Or he could do what the note asked. He could bring these secrets into the light. As he stood in that hidden chamber, surrounded by the carefully preserved legacy of a legend, Marcus Chen made his choice. Marcus didn't leave the hidden room for 3 hours. He couldn't. The moment he opened the first journal, dated January 1983, he became transfixed by the words flowing across the pages in Michael Jackson's distinctive handwriting. The writing was surprisingly neat, methodical even, as if the act of journaling had been a form of meditation for the troubled superstar. Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor, his back against the cool wall, and began to read. The early entries were innocent enough. They detailed the making of Thriller, the creative process behind songs that would become cultural touchstones. Michael wrote about staying up until dawn in the studio, chasing a sound he could hear in his head but struggled to capture in reality. He described the moment when Quincy Jones suggested adding the sound effects to Thriller, how the idea had seemed ridiculous at first but quickly revealed itself as genius. There were sketches in the margins, dance moves diagrammed with arrows and stick figures, musical notation scribbled frantically as if he feared the melody might escape his mind before he could trap it on paper. But as Marcus turned the pages, the tone began to shift. By mid-1983, as Thriller was breaking every record in existence and Michael Jackson was becoming the most famous person on the planet, the journal entries grew darker. Michael wrote about the pressure, the constant demand for more, better, bigger. He described feeling like a machine designed to produce entertainment, his humanity slowly being stripped away by the very success he had worked so hard to achieve. "They don't see me anymore," one entry read. "They see the moonwalk. They see the glove. They see the image we created. But me, the real me, I'm disappearing." Marcus felt his throat tighten as he read these words. Here was a man the world had idolized, envied, and ultimately vilified, expressing a loneliness so profound it seemed to seep through the pages themselves. The journal entry from the day after the Motown 25 performance, the night the moonwalk became a global phenomenon, was particularly heartbreaking. "I should be happy," Michael had written. "I should be celebrating. But all I feel is tired. So tired. And scared. Because I know what comes next. I know what they'll expect. How do you top something the whole world is talking about? How do you stay human when the world wants you to be superhuman?" The journals progressed through the years, chronicling the victory tour, the purchase of Neverland Ranch, the changing relationships with his family. Michael wrote extensively about his father, Joseph Jackson, with a mixture of resentment, sadness, and grudging respect. He acknowledged the role his father had played in his success, but couldn't forgive the methods, the emotional abuse, the childhood stolen in pursuit of perfection. "He made me a star," one entry stated bluntly, "but he forgot to let me be a boy first." Marcus reached for the second journal, this one starting in 1987. The entries here focus heavily on the Bad Album and World Tour, but also on something else. Michael had begun to notice the media's shift in how they portrayed him. The tabloids were no longer content to simply report on his music. They wanted scandal, controversy, drama. They wanted to tear down the image they had helped build. Michael documented every false story, every twisted headline, every invasion of privacy. He seemed to be creating a record, gathering evidence of the systematic destruction of his reputation. One entry, dated in late 1988, sent chills down Marcus's spine. Michael had written, "They've started calling me strange, eccentric, weird, because I don't live the way they think a celebrity should live, because I value privacy and innocence and wonder over parties and publicity. They are building a narrative, and I can see where it leads. They are going to try to destroy me. Not for anything I've done, but because destroying icons is profitable. Tragedy sells better than triumph." The accuracy of his prediction, written years before Michael's troubles truly began, was eerily prophetic. Marcus found himself reading faster, turning pages with increasing urgency. The third journal covered 1991 to 1993, the years leading up to the first allegations that will forever alter public perception of Michael Jackson. The entries from this period were different, more guarded, more paranoid, but also more detailed. Michael had documented everything. Every meeting, every interaction, every person who entered his life during this period. He wrote about the families who befriended him, the children he tried to help, the motives he questioned but tried to give the benefit of the doubt. And then came the entries after the allegations. The pain in these words was palpable, almost physical. Marcus had to stop reading several times because the emotions were so raw, so devastating, it felt like an invasion to continue. "I've been falsely accused of the worst thing imaginable," Michael had written. Not just in the eyes of the law, but in the court of public opinion where there is no defense, no due process, no mercy. "They've taken my love for children, my desire to preserve innocence in a corrupted world, and twisted it into something monstrous. I can feel my heart breaking, actually breaking, like something inside me is shattering into pieces that can never be put back together." But it was what came next that made Marcus realize why this room had been hidden. Michael hadn't just documented his emotions. He had documented everything else too. Names, dates, financial transactions, recorded phone calls, security footage. He had created a comprehensive archive proving his innocence, showing the motives of his accusers, revealing the coordination between certain families and tabloid media. The evidence was methodical, overwhelming, and had apparently never been fully presented to the public or even to his own legal team. Marcus's hand shook as he reached for the fourth journal. This one covered the trial years, the continued persecution, the slow destruction of Michael's health and spirit. But interspersed with the darkness were moments of determination. Michael wrote about his children, about wanting to survive long enough to ensure their futures were secure. He wrote about new music, new creative visions, new dreams that kept him moving forward despite everything. The final journal, number 5, ended just weeks before Michael's death. The last entry was dated May 29th, 2009, less than a month before he would die. It read, "I'm tired now, so tired, but I'm also at peace. I've created this room, this archive, as my final insurance. Not for me. I don't need vindication anymore. But for my children, for history, for the truth. If you're reading this, then you were meant to find it. Use it wisely. The world needs to know that even icons are human, that even legends can be broken, but that truth, real truth, survives everything." Marcus closed the journal and sat in silence. He now understood the weight of what he had discovered. Marcus knew he needed help. This discovery was too large, too important, too potentially explosive for one person to handle alone. But who could he trust? The wrong person could exploit this information, twist it for profit or attention, or worse, make it disappear entirely. As he sat in the hidden room, surrounded by evidence that could rewrite the narrative of one of the most famous lives ever lived, Marcus made a decision. He would document everything first, create his own record before involving anyone else. He pulled out his phone and began taking photographs. Every journal page, every label on every tape, every detail of the room itself. His phone storage filled quickly, so he ran upstairs to his locker, grabbed his tablet, and returned to continue the work. Hours passed. The mausoleum above would be opening soon. Visitors would arrive to pay their respects, and Marcus needed to be at his post. But he couldn't stop. Not yet. The hard drives presented a problem. They were old, using connection types that modern computers no longer supported. But the laptop in the corner, carefully preserved and still holding a charge from some hidden power source, offered a solution. Marcus hesitated before pressing the power button. What if it didn't work? What if years of dormancy had corrupted the system? But when his finger touched the button, the screen flickered to life, displaying a desktop background that made Marcus's breath catch. It was a photo of Michael with his 3 children, all of them laughing, genuinely happy, caught in a private moment of pure joy. The desktop was organized meticulously. Folders labeled by year, by subject, by type of content. There were video files, audio recordings, scan documents, and text files containing what appeared to be detailed accounts of every major event in Michael's life from his perspective. Marcus clicked on a folder labeled 1993 Truth and found himself staring at a treasure trove of evidence. Phone recordings of conversations between accusers' families and tabloid journalists discussing payment amounts. Financial records showing money trails between media companies and supposed witnesses. Security camera footage from Neverland with timestamps that contradicted accusers' testimonies. But there was more. Much more. Another folder, labeled The Industry, contained recordings of business meetings, contracts, and communications that revealed the darker side of the entertainment world. Michael had documented decades of exploitation, manipulation, and corruption. He had recorded conversations with executives who admitted to using manufactured scandals to boost sales. He had saved emails discussing how to create and control celebrity narratives for profit. This wasn't just Michael Jackson's personal vindication. This was an indictment of an entire system. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor asking where he was. The mausoleum had opened, and he was needed above. Marcus quickly copied as many files as he could fit onto his tablet, closed the laptop, and made his way back up the stairs. Before sealing the entrance, he took one long look at the room, committing every detail to memory. Then he pressed the marble section back into place, and the hidden chamber disappeared beneath his feet as if it had never existed. The rest of that day passed in a blur. Marcus went through motions of his job, trimming flowers, polishing brass, guiding visitors, but his mind was miles away. He watched people pose at Michael Jackson's crypt, leaving flowers and notes, taking photos, wiping away tears. Did they know what lay beneath their feet? Did they understand that the truth they might have been seeking all these years was literally right under them? That evening, Marcus drove home to his small apartment in Glendale. He lived alone, had for 5 years since his divorce. His ex-wife had kept the house, the friends, the life they had built together. He had kept his solitude in his work. But tonight, that solitude felt like a blessing. He needed privacy for what came next. He needed time to think, to plan, to understand the full scope of what he had found. He made coffee, strong and black, and settled at his kitchen table with his tablet. For the next 6 hours, Marcus Chen, a groundskeeper who had never graduated college, who had never been part of anything larger than his own quiet life, became an investigator, an archivist, a guardian of secrets that could change everything. He read document after document, watched video after video, listened to recording after recording, and with each piece of evidence, the picture became clearer. Michael Jackson had been systematically destroyed not because of what he had done, but because of what he represented and what he knew. He had been too powerful, too influential, too unwilling to play by the rules of an industry built on exploitation and control. When he had started speaking out about artist rights, about contract fairness, about the way record companies treated musicians as commodities, he had made enemies. When he had tried to use his platform for genuine good, when he had refused to be just an entertainer and insisted on being an activist, those enemies had mobilized. The 1993 allegations hadn't been organic. They had been coordinated, engineered, weaponized. The evidence was all there. Communications between the accuser's father and a screenwriter discussing how to craft the most damaging story. Recordings of the father admitting he saw this as his chance to make millions. Financial records showing payments flowing from tabloids to supposed witnesses before they ever gave testimony. And through it all, Michael's desperate attempt to clear his name while being advised by lawyers and publicists to settle, to make it go away quietly, to accept the stain on his reputation in exchange for peace. But Michael hadn't wanted peace. He had wanted truth. And when the system had failed him, when settling the civil case had been portrayed as an admission of guilt rather than a desperate attempt to end a nightmare, something had broken inside him. The journals documented his spiral into paranoia and pain, his increasing dependence on prescription medications to cope with the anxiety and sleeplessness, his growing isolation from a world that had turned against him. The 2005 trial had been more the same. More accusations, more media circus, more presumption of guilt despite a complete lack of physical evidence. Michael had documented this period too, though the entries were shorter, more fragmented. He had been falling apart, his health deteriorating under the weight of stress and public hatred. But he had also been meticulous in preserving evidence. Every inconsistency in prosecution witnesses' testimonies. Every piece of exculpatory evidence the media chose not to report. every communication that revealed the motives of his accusers. Marcus sat back in his chair as the first light of dawn began filtering through his kitchen window. He hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. His mind was racing with the implications of everything he had learned. This evidence could restore Michael Jackson's reputation. It could vindicate a man who had died under a cloud of suspicion and judgment. But it would also expose powerful people, wealthy corporations, a media industrial complex that had profited from his destruction. The question now was what to do with it. Who to trust with information this volatile, this valuable, this dangerous. Marcus called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. His supervisor was concerned, but Marcus assured him it was just a bad cold, nothing serious. He needed time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to figure out how to handle the atomic bomb of information he now possessed. He spent the morning researching investigative journalists, documentary filmmakers, legal experts specializing in posthumous defamation cases. Every potential path forward seemed fraught with danger. If he went to the mainstream media, they might bury the story to protect their own complicity in Michael's persecution. If he went to social media, the information might be dismissed as conspiracy theory or deepfakes. If he went to the Jackson family directly, they might try to suppress evidence that was painful or complicated. And if he went to the wrong person, the whole thing could be twisted into something it wasn't, used for profit rather than truth. His phone rang. It was his supervisor again. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. There are people here asking about you. They say they are from the Jackson estate. They're asking if anything unusual has happened recently in the mausoleum, if anyone has reported any disturbances near Michael's resting place." I told them no, but Marcus, what's going on? Marcus's blood ran cold. How could they know? He had been so careful. Unless the room itself had some kind of monitoring system. Unless opening that entrance had triggered an alarm somewhere. "Tell them I haven't noticed anything unusual," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. "I'll be back at work tomorrow." He hung up and immediately began backing up all the data he had copied from the hidden room. Cloud storage, external hard drives, USB sticks hidden in different locations. If someone was already searching for the room's contents, he needed to ensure the information couldn't be contained or destroyed. His hands shook as he worked, adrenaline flooding his system. He wasn't just a groundskeeper anymore. He was a target. By early afternoon, Marcus had secured copies of the evidence in 7 different locations. Then he sat down and wrote a detailed account of everything he had found, everything he had learned, uploaded it to a scheduled email system that would automatically send copies to 50 different journalists and public figures if he didn't log in to cancel the send within 72 hours. It was a crude dead man switch, but it was protection. That evening, there was a knock on his door. Marcus looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in expensive suits. They didn't look threatening exactly, but they didn't look friendly either. "Mr. Chen, we're representatives of the Jackson estate. We'd like to speak with you about a matter concerning Forest Lawn Memorial Park." Marcus opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. "What matter?" "May we come in? This conversation would be better conducted privately." "I'm comfortable talking like this." The taller of the 2 men sighed. "Mr. Chen, we know you discovered the room. We know you've accessed its contents. We're not here to threaten you. We're here to explain why that room was sealed and why it needs to remain that way." Marcus felt his pulse quicken but kept his expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please, Mr. Chen, we're not your enemies. The room was created by Michael Jackson's instructions. Yes, but it was sealed after his death for good reason. The information it contains, while personally vindicating to Michael, would hurt many people. Living people. People who were children when events occurred and are now adults trying to live normal lives. People who cooperated with investigations. Family members who are still grieving. Or, Marcus said quietly, people who profited from destroying an innocent man and want to keep that profitable narrative intact. The second man stepped forward. "We're prepared to offer you significant compensation for your silence. Enough money that you'd never need to work again. All we ask is that you return any copies of the room's contents and allow us to properly secure the entrance. No one else needs to know it exists. So you can bury the truth forever. So we can protect people from a media circus that would help no one. Michael is gone. Nothing in that room will bring him back. But releasing its content would destroy lives, reignite painful controversies, and ultimately accomplish nothing except generating headlines and making lawyers rich. Marcus stared at these men, at their expensive suits and rehearsed arguments, and felt anger rising in his chest. Michael Jackson wanted this information found. He left a note saying the world might be ready for the truth now. Who are you to decide he was wrong? We're the people who have spent 15 years managing his legacy and protecting his children. We're the people who understand that sometimes the truth causes more harm than good. Please, Mr. Chen, take the money. Walk away. Let Michael rest in peace. He can't rest in peace while his name is still associated with things he didn't do. The tall man's expression hardened slightly. Then let me be clear. If you release this information, we will fight it. We will question its authenticity. We will tie you up in legal proceedings for years. We have resources you can't imagine, and we will use them. This isn't a threat. It's simply the reality of the situation. Marcus stepped back and closed the door. He stood there, breathing hard, listening to the men's footsteps retreat down the hallway. They had shown their hand. They were afraid of what the room contained, which meant the information was even more powerful than he had realized. It also meant he was now in genuine danger, not physical danger perhaps, but legal, financial, personal danger. He grabbed his laptop and began typing. If they wanted to suppress this information, he would make that impossible. He would need to go public, but carefully, strategically. He started composing an email to the one journalist he had researched who seemed genuinely interested in truth over sensation, a documentary filmmaker named Sarah Patterson who had spent 20 years investigating wrongful convictions and media manipulation. He included a brief overview of what he had found, proof that the evidence existed, and a request to meet in person. Before he could send it, his phone rang. An unknown number. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Chen. The voice was female, older, with a slight accent he couldn't place. Please don't hang up. My name is Catherine Jackson. I'm Michael's mother. I know you found the room. I know what it contains. And I need to tell you something my son told me before he died. He said that when the room was eventually discovered, the person who found it would have a choice to make. And he trusted that whoever found it would make the right choice. Not the easy choice. The right one. Marcus sat down heavily. Mrs. Jackson, I don't know what the right choice is. Then let me help you understand something, Mr. Chen. My son suffered more than any person should have to suffer. He was kind and gentle and loving, and the world crucified him for it. That room contains his voice, his truth, his pain. And yes, releasing it will cause chaos. It will hurt some people. It will make others very angry. But keeping it sealed, that would be letting the lies win. That would be saying that powerful people can destroy innocent lives without consequence. Is that the world you want to live in? Marcus closed his eyes. When he opened them, his decision was made. Marcus met Sarah Patterson in a coffee shop in downtown Los Angeles 3 days later. He had chosen a public place, crowded enough to feel safe but quiet enough to talk. Sarah was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet competence. She listened to his story without interrupting, taking notes in a worn leather journal that reminded Marcus of the journals hidden beneath the mausoleum. When he finished, she sat back and studied him carefully. You understand what you're asking me to do? This will consume years of my life. It will make enemies of powerful people. And even with all this evidence, there will be those who refuse to believe it. But I'll do it, because this is exactly the kind of story that needs to be told. They worked together over the following months. Sarah assembled a team of researchers, fact-checkers, and legal experts. Every piece of evidence from the hidden room was authenticated, verified, cross-referenced. They tracked down people mentioned in the journals, some willing to talk, others threatening legal action at the mere mention of cooperating. They digitized every videotape, every audio recording, every document. The work was meticulous, exhaustive, and absolutely necessary. The Jackson estate tried to stop them. Court orders were filed. Cease and desist letters arrived weekly. Private investigators followed Marcus to document his movements. But Sarah had dealt with intimidation before, and she had built her career on being unstoppable when she believed in a story. She had also been careful to secure multiple copies of everything in different jurisdictions, making it legally impossible to suppress the information entirely. Katherine Jackson became an unexpected ally. She was tired, she told Marcus during one of their phone conversations, of watching her son's memory be defined by accusations rather than his artistry and humanitarian work. She was tired of seeing her grandchildren grow up under the shadow of lies. If this documentary could help correct the record, she would support it, regardless of what other family members or state representatives wanted. The documentary was titled simply The Hidden Room. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival 18 months after Marcus had first discovered that crack in the marble floor. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The evidence was undeniable. Phone recordings of accusers' family members discussing extortion strategies, financial records showing payment trails between tabloids and witnesses, security footage that contradicted testimonies, expert analysis of court documents revealing prosecutorial misconduct, and through it all, Michael's own voice from the journals, reading his own words, speaking his own truth. The media landscape exploded. News organizations that had once gleefully reported every salacious detail of Michael's troubles now had to reckon with their own role in his persecution. Think pieces were written about media ethics, about the presumption of innocence, about how society treats its celebrities. Legal experts discussed the implications of the evidence for other cases, other accusations, other lives destroyed by false allegations. The documentary spawned a national conversation about truth, justice, and the power of narratives. But it wasn't unanimous praise. Some accused the documentary of being revisionist history. Others claimed the evidence was fabricated or taken out of context. Certain media outlets, particularly those whose complicity was most clearly demonstrated in the recordings and documents, launched aggressive campaigns to discredit the film. They questioned Marcus's motives, Sarah's credibility, even the authenticity of Michael's handwriting in the journals despite multiple expert verifications. The most painful opposition came from those who had built careers or identities around being Michael Jackson's victims. The documentary had carefully avoided naming names, focusing instead on patterns and systems rather than individuals. But in the age of internet research, people quickly identified who was referenced in various recordings and documents. Some doubled down on their accusations. Others went silent. A few, in private conversations with Sarah's team, admitted they had been pressured or coached but felt trapped by their own previous statements. Marcus watched all of this unfold from a strange distance. He had become a public figure overnight, the man who discovered the hidden room. He was invited to speak at film festivals, interviewed on news programs, celebrated as a truth-teller and condemned as an exploiter depending on who was doing the talking. His quiet life as a groundskeeper was over, replaced by something he had never wanted, fame by association with someone else's tragedy. But when he saw Michael Jackson's children speak publicly for the first time about the documentary, about what it meant to them to finally have evidence of their father's innocence presented to the world, Marcus knew he had made the right choice. Prince Jackson spoke about growing up with the weight of accusations hanging over his father's legacy, about defending a man he knew was good and kind but couldn't prove was innocent. Paris Jackson cried as she talked about finally feeling like she could breathe, like the world might finally see her father the way she had always known him. Blanket, now going by Bye Guy, simply said thank you to Marcus during an interview, 2 quiet words that carried more weight than all the controversy and debate surrounding the documentary. The hidden room was eventually sealed permanently by mutual agreement between the estate, the Jackson family, and Forest Lawn. But not before everything inside was properly archived, catalogued, and preserved by the Library of Congress. Future historians would have access to the complete record. Michael Jackson's voice would be part of the historical narrative, not just the media's version of his story. A year after the documentary's release, Marcus returned to his job at Forest Lawn. He had been offered other opportunities, book deals and speaking engagements, but he had declined them all. He wanted his old life back, or as much of it as he could reclaim. On his first day back, he walked through the great mausoleum to Michael Jackson's crypt. Someone had left fresh flowers that morning, and a note that read simply, "The truth will set you free." Marcus stood there in the quiet, thinking about the journey that had started with a crack in marble and ended with a crack in a carefully constructed false narrative. He thought about Michael Jackson, a man he had never met but had come to understand intimately through his own words. A man who had been simultaneously worshipped and destroyed by a world that wanted to own him but couldn't accept him as fully human. The story wasn't over. The conversations the documentary had sparked would continue for years, decades perhaps. But at least now those conversations would be informed by evidence, by facts, by Michael's own voice speaking from beyond the grave. The hidden room had served its purpose. It had preserved truth through years of darkness, waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right time to emerge. As Marcus walked back through the mausoleum toward his maintenance cart and his familiar routines, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. He had been chosen by chance or fate or divine intervention to find that room, and he had honored the trust that discovery represented. Michael Jackson had believed that whoever found his hidden truth would make the right choice about what to do with it. Marcus hoped he had proven that belief correct. The world now had the evidence. What it chose to do with that evidence, how it chose to reckon with uncomfortable truths about media manipulation, false accusations, and the destruction of innocent lives, that was beyond his control. He had done his part. He had opened the hidden room and let the light in. That, Marcus thought as he picked up his trimming shears and returned to work, would have to be enough.